Welcome back to our last day of week 3 for our online course here. Hopefully the test wasn't too bad yesterday. Again, if you haven't submitted it and you're watching this video on Friday, you should submit the test as soon as possible. Right? Each day that you don't, like a certain amount of points will be deducted from the top of it. Okay. So if you remember on Wednesday, we were talking about cohabitation and why cohabitation is not the best line to pursue if your goal is to have a happy and holy marriage, right? If you have other goals in mind, then maybe cohabitation will yield the results that you're looking for. The reason I had you answer that question way back when was that I think we will lose sight of that in specific moments, right? This is a classic way to trip someone up. If you read the Screw Tape letters, Screw Tape is constantly recommending this as a way to get humans to sin, is get them kind of looking down at the present, although we did say the present is important, but get them looking down at the immediate desire that's in their heart rather than the long-term plan. And by that I mean that maybe right now cohabitation is the easier option, right? Think about when you're junior, senior in college or just out of college, or maybe you're in a new city, a new state for your first job or something, and there's no one around to tell you otherwise. And it's just an easier option than to get married or even to get engaged, right? But don't lose sight of the real goal, which is if your real goal is to have a good and holy marriage, then you want to do the things that will build that up in the long term. And so today it's still kind of on the negative side. When we flip into a few of the other myths in the next week, we'll see sort of the positive side of these things. But I still want to make the positive argument, which is that the reason you shouldn't cohabit before marriage is not simply because the church said so, or I said so, or your mom and dad said so. That won't last, right? That way of thinking never actually works. The reason that you should ultimately choose not to cohabit is because you're trying to pursue the best marriage possible, or give yourself the best chance of having the best marriage possible. Nothing can guarantee it, right? But you would always want to do the best that you could. And the same analogy that I've used over and over again, tomorrow I'm going to try to run the Crescent City Classic. It's going to be virtual, so I time myself on my watch, and then I submit my time. But if I'm going to run the best that I can tomorrow, tonight I can't eat a bunch of junk food, right? I've got to get a good night's sleep, right? Now, it's very possible that if I stayed up late eating Fat Boy's Pizza, which is down the road, it's very possible I stayed up late watching movies, eating a ton of pizza, I might still run well tomorrow. I might. But I'm not going to give myself the best chance at it. And it seems weird for something so important as marriage to not give yourself the best chance possible. And hopefully by the end of today, you'll see that cohabitation doesn't give you the best chance possible. Okay? So the real question then, it comes down to these couple questions. I know this is the question, but there's a couple questions here. If marriage changes nothing, if you have the low view of marriage, remember, if you think marriage is just a piece of paper, just a legal thing, what does it matter? If it changes nothing, then who cares? Just get married, take the tax benefits, right? And it's funny, right? A lot of people that have the low view of marriage say, it's just a piece of paper, who the heck cares? Well, if it's just a piece of paper, get married, take the benefits. If you don't care about it, just get married and work the system. But people don't do that. And I think it's because in the back of their mind, they know that it actually really, really does, in fact, matter. So then the second part, then if it must matter, well then, what are you doing to prepare for it, right? So if you have the low view of marriage, it's almost self-defeating. At some point, you have to realize, okay, yeah, I guess it does matter. And a lot of couples that have the low view of marriage end up really realizing that at some point, right? So if it really matters, what are you doing right now to prepare for it? And I think that's where you see a lot of this cognitive disconnect, right? Where you've got, on the one hand, you say, yes, marriage is really important, but I'm not going to pursue a life that's going to help me prepare for marriage. Again, cohabitation. Okay. The reason we had How I Met Your Mother up there, at some point, Robin moves in with Barney. I think she moves in with Ted twice, 2 different times. Marshall and Lily, they move in together before they're married as well. Their marriage ends up working out. Robin and Barney, I guess I shouldn't say. You should go watch the film, the movie series, TV show, whatever it is. And it's a pretty funny show. Not always most ethically correct show, but you'll see how it ends. Okay. All right, so high view of marriage. If you've got this high view of marriage, because again, the low view of marriage is sort of self-defeating, right? It's not going to ultimately lead anywhere, at least logically. But what if you have the high view of marriage? If you say, okay, yes, I'm with you, marriage is really important, and that's why I want to live together with my spouse or my future spouse to make sure that everything's going to be right. I like to call this the Seinfeld model. Many of you may have seen the show Seinfeld. It's probably one of the greatest comedies ever produced. And in it, the main character, Jerry Seinfeld, is constantly trying to find the perfect woman, right? And so many of the episodes revolve around the fact that he dates this seemingly perfect woman until some fault comes up, right? There's an episode called The Man Hands, when he's dating this woman who's otherwise really beautiful, but she has the hands of a man. She's got these really thick hands, right? Or he's dating this woman who he realizes she wears the exact same outfit every single day. Or someone's a close talker or a low talker or a high talker. There's times when he sabotages the relationship for other reasons. There's times when he's a neat freak and she used his toothbrush and doesn't want to share germs. He's always looking for a fault or flaw in that relationship to almost say, okay, if it's not perfect, then I'm getting out. And it's not because he has a low view of marriage, it's because he has a high view of marriage. And that's what we're going to kind of focus in on today is, well, what if you have this really important view of marriage, that it's a big deal? Why wouldn't you want to test drive the marriage, right? Why wouldn't you want to see if you're compatible so that you don't get divorced, right? If marriage is so important, I want to avoid divorce. So the first thing is, right off the bat, living together with someone before you're married decreases your chances of a successful marriage by a lot. Yesterday we said, again, it almost doubles the chance of you getting divorced. So if you look at this chart up here, it shows that if you live together before you're married, if you were engaged when you lived together and when you were not engaged, it shows the chances of you having a successful marriage this many years into your marriage, right? So 1 year into your marriage, they're both pretty good chances that you'll remain married at the end of your first year of marriage. But look at 10, okay? 10 years into your marriage, if you lived together before you were married, you've already dropped from a 95% chance all the way down to about a 55% chance. You've dropped 40 percentage points for no other reason than cohabitation. Now, again, we're going to look at in a little bit more detail some of these things. Is it direct causation or is it correlation? A little bit of both, right? Again, engaged. If you were engaged when you're living with the person, it follows a similar pattern. A little bit better chance, right? It kind of caps out here at 10 years at about 68%, right? This particular chart doesn't have on it. Oh shoot! I kind of clipped out the source there, but I can show you the source later. This particular chart doesn't have people that lived together, or sorry, people that did not live together but got married, and it follows. It's actually sort of around this line, right? Like it does drop. Your chance of divorce does drop, but it's significantly higher, especially than the ones over here. It never dips this low, right? It hovers around this area. And then we're going to talk about, when we get into more of the sexual ethics part, how other certain activities can actually increase your chance of getting to about 99% chance of remaining together for life, which is pretty crazy. Okay, what about serial cohabitation? Serial cohabitation is has nothing to do with breakfast food. It's, do you cohabit with more than one person? So in other words, if you're a serial cohabiter, you're someone that in nearly every relationship that you're in, at some point you're moving in with that person, right? People that are serial cohabitors have an incredibly high rate of divorce, and it makes sense, right? The more relationships that you got into a living arrangement, it's easier to get out of them, right? It's an inverse relationship. If I had you read the chapter, you'd see that it's like an exponential relationship in the opposite direction, right? So that the more that you cohabit, the shorter your relationship length is. And the same goes for length of relationship. The longer you cohabit, the greater your chance of divorce, even if it's just with one person. So if you cohabit for 10 years, you actually have a much higher chance of divorce once you get married than if you cohabited for 1 year. There's a couple of reasons for that are going to be in the next slide, so I'm not going to talk about it just yet. But the last slide here, last thing to note, is that in terms of like if you just took the ratios, right, just all the numbers and then condense it down to a ratio. If you live together with your future spouse, you've already doubled your chance of divorce, right? 1 to 2. If you've lived with someone other than your future spouse, look at this jump, right? It's this exponential jump, right, from 2 to 4. It's not a high exponent, but you get the point. Is that you're already seeing this huge increase by just living with one other person prior to marriage than your spouse. If you were to do this over time, again, this serial cohabiting, with every relationship you're moving in together, you are entrenching the habits that lead to a greater chance of divorce once you do in fact get married. And that leads us to our final slide for today.